What could go right? I'm Zachary Carabell, the founder of the Progress Network, joined as always by Emma Varvaloucas, the executive director of the Progress Network. And this is the adjunct to our longer form podcast, also called, conveniently or confusingly enough, What Could Go Right, which is also paired with our weekly newsletter called, conveniently enough or confusingly enough, What Could Go Right, which you can get at theprogressnetwork.org. And this is our weekly progress report where we highlight some news of the week, or rather just news that is out there that we are highlighting this week about things that have gone right in a world where so much is evidently and obviously going wrong. So on that note, we will turn to Ms. Varvaloucas and her magical hat, not a sorting hat, but a magical hat of good stories. So what are you going to reach into and bring out for us today?
I just want to say, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff. It's my immediate reaction to that. No, actually, I'm going to...
So thank you for joining us today. That is it for our week
Harry
of
Potter
news. We're going to leave you with Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. Yes, exactly.
So actually, I wanted to start by talking about the election. Something good about the election. Shocker, I know. Yeah.
Gasp.
So... Well, I should say, by the way, that I've been designated by the government as a special federal voter. I filled out my ballot day abroad. And in case anyone was wondering, voting from abroad is not that easy.
What is a special federal?
Well, because I vote from abroad, I can't vote in I'm not eligible to vote for all of the elections in the United States with my New York address. But I can vote for a House president. So I filled out that ballot today. And they call you a special federal voter.
What district?
What district?
But you vote for the House based on your last permanent residency?
Yes. There's actually some confusion for me around that because unclear to me, you're supposed to vote based on your last permanent residency or the last place you voted or where I've been filing my taxes for the last 4 years. So I requested a ballot from both places and filled out the ballot that came. Actually sure if I did that correctly or not, but anyway, this is a digression from the good news.
That is confusing.
This is just personal stories about my life.
Okay.
Anyway, if Donald Trump loses, is he going to create post-election chaos? Are we going to have a repeat of January 6th, January 6th, 2025? Is he going to push people to not certify the election results? And I think it's actually not that well known, and I appreciated this article in Semaphore today. Today being a few days before this episode is being listened to on Friday the 25th of October, that there was a bipartisan law passed in 2022 that made it harder for Donald Trump to pull something like that ever again. So previously, you only needed one senator and one House member to object to any state's presidential results and force a vote. Now, because of this new law, the objection threshold is much higher. You need 20 senators and 87 House members, so 1/5 of each chamber. So essentially, even if Donald Trump loses, if he's trying to sow chaos, he's going to have to pull a significant amount of the House and the Senate to go along with him for that. And it's just very, very unlikely that that could happen. The law also made sure to clarify that the vice president's role in all of this is only symbolic. So I'm not really sure how many people are really aware of that. There really were things that were put into place post 2020 election that is hopefully going to end up with a smoother result this time around, despite the fact that we do have Trump running once again.
Yeah, this is, I think it was called the Electoral Count Act, right?
That's a good question.
And it tried to address some of the issues that arose in the weeks before January 6th. Not to dampen that. I mean, it was good, and this was a bill that actually Mitch McConnell championed, one of his last acts as Senate Majority Leader. You could imagine 87 House Republicans very easily challenging just a few states.
Really?
That would be enough.
I don't think so. I think even 87. If Trump loses, though, maybe. I mean, consider they would want to pull him through. You think there are 87 Republican House members that would do that?
I do.
And 20 senators?
But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo. 20 senators is going to be a much harder threshold. That's going to be a much harder one, definitely.
All right.
But it was a good act, and it was a corrective to some of the just sort of unexamined structural issues that no one had taken advantage of, but obviously we're taking advantage of on January 6th.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see.
Guess we'll see how it
We will
goes.
see. Know that a lot of people are prepping for this election that we rarely hear about. We hear a lot about the threats. We don't hear a lot about the prep on the other end. Apparently, Kamala Harris's team has hundreds of lawyers preparing for any eventuality. So
Yes.
we shall see soon. So let's move away from the election, which I think everyone will be happy to move away from it right now. Let's talk about the world's first mRNA vaccine for norovirus entering a phase 3 clinical trial. I don't know if you ever had norovirus, but I have, and I would have loved to have been
Nope,
vaccinated
I
against
don't
it.
think
Oh,
so.
it's terrible. It's terrible. It's kind of like the flu, but
Oh,
more
lovely.
nausea oriented. It's awful.
Ooh, delightful.
So, might be one of those diseases that are going to get an mRNA vaccine. If this clinical trial is successful, we aren't going to know for a while. It's a 2-year clinical trial. But I do make a point to try to follow up on all of the mRNA based vaccines that have followed from the COVID one.
And yeah, I mean, this is one of these things where obviously the COVID vaccine sort of alerted the world to mRNA as a technology that could develop, that could accelerate drug development. Obviously, there have been many people for years saying this and saying, hey, wait a minute, we got this thing. But clearly was never going to be confined to just a COVID vaccine. And we are seeing time after time after time, disease after disease in the years since 2020, where mRNA technology has accelerated drug development. So this is just like one more, here you go. We're in a new world of drug development, and the time frame is much narrower. In fact, the only real bottleneck, maybe a legit one, maybe not, is the regulatory process, which, legitimately wants to have serious scrutiny to see what side effects are and unexpected or unanticipated dangers. But the bottlenecks are less and less about the creation and development and more just about the licensing.
I'm going to go do a quick tour back to the pandemic since we're already there, actually, talking about the development of mRNA.
Woohoo.
This is a kind of a fun, wacky, peculiar, I don't want to say silver lining, but outcome of the COVID pandemic. So, as I think people know, the flu shot every year, it's against a bunch of different strains of the flu, and scientists essentially try to guess which strains are going to be active that year, and they put those strains into the shot. And this year, when it came time to put together the annual flu shot, they realized that one strain, which is called B. Yamagata, don't ask me why, I don't know, has essentially gone extinct. And they think that it has gone extinct because of the COVID lockdowns, like because people were social distancing and masking so much. It was already in low circulation at that time, and that we essentially made it go away on our own, which is the first time, if this is all true, it would be the first documented time that we have eliminated a flu strain through a change in human behavior, which is kind of wacky and wild and fun.
Huh. Wow.
Yep.
Huh. Although that was partly because of the human behavior during lockdowns.
Oh, and it was
right?
entirely to do with the human behavior during lockdowns. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
It wasn't like we got really good at social distancing for the flu or something like that. It was entirely because of COVID. But it is like one little wacky, cool thing that came out of that whole terrible era.
I was at a dinner the other night and people were, you knew this was going to happen. We're nostalgizing that 3-4 month period from March of 2020 to the summer of 2020, where just the nature of everything shutting down meant more time with families, more time in communities, more connection, more slower paced. And they were fondly looking back at that as a moment in time, which is fascinating, right? Because I don't think anyone at the time felt fond.
Mm.
But the ability of humans to recast the past is extraordinary. Just something to remember, like how we experience what we are now experiencing will change over time as it recedes in the past. Even Nixon is having a degree of like, yeah, maybe he wasn't so bad. So everything gets reframed?
I have to say, I was probably in the very small minority in the first lockdown. I was very fond about it. I had a great time, and that
See?
remains to this
See?
day.
There you go.
But yeah, no, most people, no,
There you
not
go.
the case. So let's move on to this announcement from ExxonMobil that they have found millions and millions and millions of tons. So anywhere between 5 to 19 million, they aren't sure, tons of lithium in Arkansas. They say that it's more than enough to meet all of the world's demand for the metal, which of course is used in electric vehicles. Great news for the US if they can figure out how to get it out of there in a cost effective way. Kind of a great news for the clean energy transition, generally speaking. It is in brine water. So there's already a process in place for extracting lithium from salty water. Chile does it a lot. They essentially just like leave it out to dry in these giant ponds. But what ExxonMobil is trying to do is develop a process for direct extraction. So you just can take the lithium out without having to deal with the salty water around it. So, okay, good news for ExxonMobil. It's not exactly what we want to cheer them on necessarily, but it's also good that we're finding more deposits of these critical minerals that we're going to need more and more in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, frankly, that some of the free marketer let's lighten our regulatory load may have some of the better of the argument. I know a lot of people will go, no, no, no. But I mean, the reality is if it takes 10 or 15 years to develop a mine because of a slew of environmental impact studies slash NIMBYism, some of which probably should be done and have a place within a process, but greater good arguments also need to have a place within the process. And we are unfortunately somewhat hamstrung, particularly in the United States, by a nothing can do any harm, put anyone out of work, or threaten anything, or carry any risk. And those are unreasonable hurdles, particularly in the urgency of, look, if you think battery technology is the next wave that will lead to a lower carbon future, there are just certain physical materials you need to produce batteries. You can't just they don't come out of thin air. And there may be trade-offs there, but we don't do a very good job right now of balancing those trade-offs. Like, what's the greater trade-off? A 10-year environmental impact study or the need for lithium to do EVs and all sorts of technologies that are inherently lower carbon? So I do think we need to think seriously about how, if every regulation is held up as sacrosanct, um, then you're not able to rank anything in terms of trade-offs and greater goods.
Yeah.
So we'll see if this one, including what your point of let's not root for ExxonMobil. Well, maybe we shouldn't root for ExxonMobil doing certain types of heavy-duty extractive of petroleum products, but maybe we should root for ExxonMobil if they're the ones who are going to lead the charge for more lithium. Somebody's got to do it, right? You don't always get to choose who.
One thing that a lot of people will know is that the extraction of minerals for the clean energy transition, there are a lot of labor rights concerns around those. So it's nice to have a huge lithium deposit in the United States where you know that people's labor rights are going to be much more taken care of than in a lot of other places around the world. So that's point number one. And point number two, the method that Chile uses right now to dry out this lithium sometimes is environmentally damaged to the fresh water around it. And ExxonMobil, to their credit, is trying to develop, like I said before, a direct extraction method, which is meant to be less or perhaps not environmentally harmful at all. So
Here's the lithium. There you are.
here's the lithium. So that's what we got for today.
That's what we got. So thank you for listening. As always, please send us your news items that you want highlighted in the newsletter or discussed here. You never know. That could be something we missed that is absolutely worth looking at. We are totally open for those ideas. Send us your critiques, your comments, your thoughts, your ideas. You're tired, you're hungry, and we will do our best to respond. So thanks for listening. We'll be back with you next week.
Thanks, Zachary. Thanks, everybody.